Camilla's final days have truly arrived. A woman who has always been scheming, always knew how to hide behind protocol and a perfectly royal smile, finally showed an ambition she believed no one would dare touch. Not through a word, not through a loud action, but through a small detail enough to shake what was considered untouchable in this family. It was a momentous event, a place where all eyes were used to a safe script. Lights shone directly on the dais. Cameras recorded every movement. Yet in that seemingly harmless moment, a familiar piece of jewelry appeared. And those who understood the royal family immediately recognized the issue. This was not an ordinary piece of jewelry. It was a symbol associated with Princess Diana, a memory that was never meant to be rewritten. No one spoke, but the atmosphere shifted noticeably. In the royal family, there are boundaries that require no documents, no announcements. Just crossing one step is enough to trigger a chain reaction. And Camilla was stepping too close to that boundary. She had titles, she had position, she had ceremonial power, but she did not have the right to touch the memory of the woman who had become a collective wound for the entire royal family. Her appearance with that symbol was no longer a matter of attire. It was a silent statement that she believed she had won, that time had erased all opposition. But in another corner, Prince William stood still. No reaction, no expression. That very silence was terrifying, because it was not acceptance. It was a sign that a boundary had just been marked. If you were Prince William, would you choose silence to keep the peace, option one? Or would you never allow Camilla to touch your mother's legacy? Option two, to understand why just one crown could push Camilla to the brink of her final days. We must go back to the history of this very piece of jewelry. The lover's knot was not created to attract attention. It was made in the 19th century in a classical style, with continuous heart-shaped knots interlaced with dangling pearls. From the very beginning, this crown was seen as a symbol of succession in the British royal family. It was not meant for anyone. Only selected women had the opportunity to wear it on the most official occasions. Before being associated with Diana, the lover's knot appeared in official portraits of previous generations of queens. But it was only when Diana wore this crown that its meaning truly changed. It was no longer just ceremonial jewelry. The lover's knot became part of the public image Diana cultivated. Gentle yet strong, traditional yet approachable. Diana wore the lover's knot in many iconic moments. State banquets with world leaders, foreign tours where every gaze was upon her, formal ceremonies where just a slight tilt of the head made the crown the focus of the camera. In hundreds of photos published in the international press throughout the 80s and 90s, the lover's knot almost always appeared with Diana. Her face, her gaze, and that crown. Three elements merged as one. According to the archives of the royal media, the lover's knot appeared in dozens of photos classified among Diana's most iconic images. In multiple public surveys in the UK and the United States, when asked about the crown associated with Diana, most participants mentioned the lover's knot first. Some surveys even showed that more than half of respondents identified the lover's knot as Diana's crown, even though legally it did not bear her name. This shows the magnitude of Diana's visual impact. She did not just wear a piece of jewelry, she transformed it into a part of her personal story, an emotional symbol, a collective memory. From that point, the lover's knot was no longer a neutral object. It carried the public's feelings, empathy, and the pain Diana endured in her marriage. That is why, after Diana's death, the lover's knot almost disappeared from royal events. No official announcement, no public explanation. But for a long time, the crown was not shown in public, not worn at state banquets, not displayed in major ceremonies. Its absence was not accidental. For the royal family, this was an extremely sensitive period. Diana's death left a wave of strong reactions. The public grieved. The press scrutinized every detail. Any image evoking Diana could spark controversy, and the lover's knot was one of the most sensitive symbols. Beyond public opinion, there was a deeper reason. The lover's knot was tied to the memory of two boys who had lost their mother, William and Harry. In that context, allowing the crown to appear on another woman's head could be seen as a lack of tact. The royal family understood this, and they chose silence. They chose to keep the crown backstage. That prolonged disappearance inadvertently increased the symbolic value of the lover's knot. Each passing year made the crown even more tightly associated with Diana in the public's memory. It was neither replaced nor forgotten. On the contrary, it became a symbol preserved through absence. It was only many years later, when Catherine wore the lover's knot at several major events, that the crown reappeared. And immediately, public reaction made one thing clear. They did not see it as a random continuation. They saw Diana in it. They saw the implicit permission from William, a legacy that was spiritual, not just ceremonial. In the British royal family, there are rules that need no written record, no seals, no signatures. But just one touch can instantly change the atmosphere within the palace. Jewelry once associated with Princess Diana belongs to that forbidden zone. No one stands up to declare prohibition, but everyone understands where the boundary lies. Imagine the royal jewelry collection as a sealed room. Every item is carefully documented. Who can use it? When it can be used? In what circumstances? On paper, they belong to the crown, meaning the shared property of the monarchy, not Diana's alone, not William's, and not Camilla's. Legally, the Queen could fully access those items, but the royal family does not operate solely by law. They operate by public acceptance. And here, a different kind of power emerges. Spiritual ownership. Jewelry may lie in a safe, but memory resides in the hearts of millions. A safe has a key. Memory has no key to open or close at one's will. With Diana, that memory is particularly strong. The public does not remember her through ceremonial documents. They remember her through images, through eyes that were sometimes sad, through a slender figure standing amidst a sea of people. And in many of those moments, the lover's knot appeared on her head. The crown was not just jewelry. It became part of Diana's face and collective memory. After Diana passed away, no announcement stated that the lover's knot was permanently put away, but it disappeared, not appearing at state banquets, not appearing at major occasions. That disappearance was not loud. It was quiet. And that quietness showed that the royal family fully understood they were treading on sensitive ground. No one wanted to trigger pain before England had time to heal. No one wanted to be seen as taking the image of a woman who had passed. Therefore, the lover's knot was left alone, not out of fear, but out of caution. Time passed. Catherine entered the royal family as William's partner. Step by step, she built her own image, not confronting Diana's memory, not trying to replace it, not seizing the old spotlight. And that restraint gradually made the public accept her as a continuation, not as erasure. When Catherine first appeared with the lover's knot, the public's reaction was very different. No outrage, no waves of criticism. The media did not ask if she had the right. They asked what William thought. And when there was no sign of opposition from the Prince of Wales, the public understood this as implicit permission. Catherine did not wear the lover's knot as a statement of power. She wore it as a controlled message, that Diana's memory was respected, that the symbol could only appear when the keeper of the memory agreed. William was the one who held that boundary. Camilla, however, was in a completely different position. Despite carrying the title of queen, despite standing at the highest position among current royal women. But in Diana's story, Camilla was not neutral. The public did not see her through neutral eyes, and the royal family understood this very clearly. With Camilla, every gesture is read through history. Every item is scrutinized through old memories. When Catherine wore the lover's knot, people saw continuation. When thinking of Camilla and the lover's knot, people saw violation, not because of protocol, but because emotions had never been on her side. That is why an unspoken rule was formed. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew jewelry associated with Diana may only appear when the wearer does not harm the public's memory. And Camilla was never in that group. Each time the public reacted strongly to Camilla's image, the royal family had to be even more cautious. They could not let a symbol become kindling for outrage. Because in this age, One poorly timed image can have greater consequences than dozens of proper speeches. That boundary had existed for many years, silent but clear. No one dared to cross it. Until an idea was put forward, it sounded like a matter of protocol, a choice of jewelry, a backstage decision. But for those who understood how heavy Diana's memory was, it was no longer a harmless suggestion. It was a step taken too close. William did not oppose publicly. No declaration, no argument in front of cameras. But from that moment, his silence carried a different meaning. A boundary had been tested, and when a boundary is touched, the relationship between William and Camilla was no longer in a safe state as before, because in the British royal family, when the rules say nothing more, memory speaks, and the public's memory is never something to be taken lightly. The moment of the controversial proposal did not appear in the newspapers. It did not leak outside. It took place during tense backstage days, when a major event was being prepared down to the smallest detail. The schedule was almost finalized, the guest list completed. International media had confirmed attendance, and in the final reviews of images, attire, messages, the name Lover's Knot was suddenly added to the consideration list, not as a casual opinion, not as a passing suggestion, but as an official option. The royal family began considering the possibility of allowing Camilla to wear the Lover's Knot at the upcoming event. The very mention of the name was enough to make the atmosphere in the meeting room fall. For those who understood the history, the Lover's Knot had never been ordinary jewelry. This was a major event. Lights, cameras, images would be broadcast worldwide in seconds. Every detail carried a message. And choosing jewelry in this context was not just an aesthetic issue. It was a statement. From Camilla and her team, the argument was presented clearly and logically. Camilla is the queen, the highest position in the current royal family for a woman. The Lover's Knot is royal property, belonging to no individual. No document prohibits the queen from using this crown. In terms of protocol, this is a completely valid choice. Supporters of the proposal argued that it was time for the royal family to show a clear transfer. Diana belonged to the past. Camilla is the queen of the present. Continuing to avoid old symbols only prolongs the division in public perception. By this argument, the Lover's Knot should not remain frozen in memory. It needed to be brought back as part of the contemporary royal family. Some said that if Camilla could not use the most iconic jewelry, her position as queen would always be considered incomplete. This was not just a story about jewelry. It was a story about the right to be recognized. And for Camilla, this was a boundary she no longer wanted to accept. However, as the argument of power was laid on the table, warnings began to appear. Not in the form of emotional opposition, but as cold analyses from the media team and image advisors. Data was presented, reaction scenarios were simulated, shocking numbers appeared in internal reports. More than 60% of social media responses were predicted to be negative if Camilla appeared with the Lover's Knot. The risk of controversy was assessed as very high. Keywords related to Diana were predicted to return to top searches within hours. Hundreds of international articles could reuse old images, old stories that the royal family had tried to push into the past. Not only British media, American and European media were also expected to react strongly. The Lover's Knot was not just a national symbol, it was tied to Diana's image globally, and associating that symbol with Camilla carried the risk of reigniting an emotional wave that had never truly subsided. The backstage atmosphere began to change noticeably. Meetings became shorter but tenser. Questions were raised and left hanging. No one wanted to directly say that the proposal was wrong, but no one dared to confirm it was safe. Silence appeared more in the room. Looks exchanged replaced words. This was a rare instance when a spiritual boundary was openly weighed internally. Previously, symbols associated with Diana were handled with cautious avoidance. No debate needed, no official decision required. The Lover's Knot was almost implicitly understood as a sensitive zone, and now that sensitive zone was being tested directly. Some advisors recalled old lessons. That power cannot be imposed on memory. that the public does not respond according to protocol logic, that some symbols, the more one tries to use them to assert position, the more they reveal the emotional gap. These arguments were not personal, they were about risk. But Camilla maintained her stance. For her, continuously avoiding symbols of the past only reinforced the feeling that she had never truly been accepted. She did not see the lover's knot as forbidden. She saw it as royal property frozen too long by others' emotions. And when a person believes they have the right, they see warnings as exaggeration. Tension spread backstage. No loud arguments, but caution existed. Decisions were postponed. Contingency plans prepared quietly. The lover's knot was no longer just an item on the list. It became the focal point of every discussion. The seemingly valid proposal began to reveal its downside. Not because it violated protocol, but because it directly collided with collective memory that had never calmed. This was no longer a story about the right to wear jewelry. This was a story about whether the royal family was willing to confront the public's emotions head-on. The tension backstage made one thing clear. When a spiritual boundary is weighed against power, no one can be certain of the outcome. Every choice carries consequences. And at this moment, the lover's knot was no longer just an accessory, it was a potential spark. And while Camilla believed she had the right, William saw something entirely different, and Prince William never stepped in front of the cameras to oppose. No statement, no press release, not a single direct word aimed at Camilla. On the surface, the public would see everything as calm. The royal family still appeared according to protocol. Photos were released on time. Handshakes happened under the lights. But inside the palace, a position had been very clearly established. William chose silence not out of hesitation. He understood precisely how the royal family operated. A public reaction would immediately turn the story into a media crisis. A single slip of the tongue could break the fragile balance he was trying to maintain. William did not want to turn the memory of his mother into a topic for newspapers. He wanted to control the story differently, more quietly, but more effectively. William's stance was communicated internally through brief exchanges. Not harsh, not emotional, but very clear. The lover's knot was not an item to be used at will. To him, it was a symbol deeply tied to Diana, not only because she had worn it many times, but because Diana's image and that crown had been imprinted in the public's collective memory for decades. William understood this better than anyone. He grew up with those photos. He witnessed how the public saw his mother through every frame. William also understood another truth. In the royal family, some things do not need to be written into law, but everyone must follow them. Jewelry may legally belong to the crown, but memory does not. Memory belongs to the public. And in that memory, the lover's knot is always linked to Diana. Allowing someone else to use that symbol, especially Camilla, was not just a matter of protocol. It was touching a memory that had never faded. William did not say this to the press, but he made it very clear in internal discussions. Diana could only be inherited in terms of image and spirit through Catherine, not because Catherine was his wife, but because Catherine represented continuity without disruption. When Catherine wore the lover's knot, the public did not object. On the contrary, they saw respect. They saw a gentle continuation, not an infringement on old memories. William understood that reaction. He followed every wave of public opinion. He read the polling reports. He knew exactly how the public responded to each image. There was one number always mentioned in internal summaries: the number of times William referenced his mother in official speeches, not private occasions, but national events, memorial ceremonies, speeches about mental health, times he spoke of compassion and empathy. Diana always appeared in that narrative, not ostentatiously, not mournfully, but consistently. And alongside that was another number. The number of times Camilla was completely absent from that memory thread, not attacked, not mentioned, but also not placed in a position of continuity. That absence was not accidental. It was a deliberate choice. William understood that the memory of Diana did not need a new character. It just needed to remain intact. William's decision was not impulsive. It was a long-term strategy. He was building his image as an heir who understood the public's emotions, someone who would not allow the royal family to be detached from collective memory. In that strategy, every detail was carefully considered, from who was allowed to wear which piece of jewelry to which images were allowed to appear at symbolic events. The internal atmosphere became heavy. No major arguments, but caution prevailed. Every proposal related to the lover's knot was scrutinized more carefully. Every decision had to consider William's reaction. No one said it outright, but everyone understood the boundary had been drawn. Camilla may not have heard public opposition, but she felt the change. Exchanges became shorter. Proposals once considered valid now met prolonged silence. In the royal family, silence is sometimes the clearest answer. William did not need to speak loudly. He did not need to create confrontation. He only needed to maintain his stance. And that stance was expressed through every small detail. Through the lover's knot continuing to appear with Catherine at important occasions, through Diana's image continuing to be acknowledged as an inseparable part of the modern royal family story. For William, this was not just about protecting the memory of his mother. It was also his way of asserting his role in the future. A future king cannot ignore public sentiment, cannot treat collective memory as something that can be adjusted by protocol. William understood that the true power of the royal family lies in public acceptance, and that acceptance is built from the smallest details. From the moment that stance was established, the relationship between William and Camilla entered a different phase. No public confrontation, no back and forth, but a cold distance formed, a frozen state. And in the British royal family, being frozen is sometimes more frightening than conflict. Camilla entered Diana's story not as a queen. She entered as the one who came last. And in the public's memory, the one who comes last is rarely forgiven, especially when the one who comes last stands in the exact position Diana once held. No need to debate right or wrong, no need for legal analysis. Just looking at public reactions over the years is enough to understand why Camilla has always been seen as taking Diana's place. From the early days when Charles and Camilla's relationship was exposed, her image became associated with betrayal. Diana was not only a wife who was wronged, she was a symbol of public suffering. Millions witnessed Diana crying in front of cameras. They heard her speak of loneliness in her marriage. They saw a young woman crushed by protocol and pressure. And in all those stories, Camilla always appeared as the name in the background. Camilla may not have directly stood in front of Diana in those moments, but in the public consciousness, she was the replacement, the chosen one when Diana was left behind. The feeling of being displaced did not come from royal protocol. It came from emotion, and emotion does not follow rules. The issue became more serious when Camilla began approaching symbols associated with Diana. Each time she appeared in symbolic contexts, public reaction worsened. Not because Camilla broke protocol, but because she inadvertently touched memories the public did not want disturbed. Jewelry is the clearest example. The pieces Diana once wore at iconic events were not merely accessories. They were images etched into memory. When Camilla appeared near those symbols, even if only proposed backstage, the public reacted immediately. She did not even need to wear them. Just a leaked suggestion that Camilla might use a symbol associated with Diana was enough to provoke backlash. There were times when Camilla appeared at memorial events, moments when she stood in the central position. Instantly, commentary arose. The public did not focus on the event's content. They focused on comparisons. Where would Diana stand? What would Diana do? What would Diana wear? And in all such comparisons, Camilla was always at a disadvantage. There were strong reactions the royal family could not ignore. Polls conducted over the years showed Camilla's disapproval rating remained high. Even after she became queen, the number did not improve significantly. In some surveys, her unpopularity surpassed that of any other senior royal. This was not a fleeting feeling. It was a long-term trend. Another number was also notable. The volume of negative commentary each time Camilla appeared with sensitive symbols always spiked compared to ordinary events. Internal communications teams documented this clearly. They monitored reactions in the press, They compiled social media sentiment. They knew exactly which details triggered public anger. Thus, Camilla was not just a queen. In the eyes of many, she was a constant reminder of an unhealed wound. Every time she appeared in a position Diana once held, old memories were stirred, not because Camilla intended it, but because the public had never truly closed the chapter on Diana. What made Camilla's image even harder to improve was that she never had the chance to build a new story separate from Diana. Every action was compared to the past. Every image was measured. There was no space for the public to see her as an independent figure. She was always seen through the lens of the one who came after. There were times when the royal family tried to adjust Camilla's image. They selected less controversial activities. They limited her appearances in sensitive contexts. But every time that boundary was approached, backlash erupted. This showed the problem was not the media. The problem lay in collective memory. Camilla did not need to do anything wrong to face opposition. Just appearing in the right place was enough. This created a paradox. She is the legitimate queen, yet she is never recognized as a spiritual successor. And in the British royal family, spiritual succession is sometimes more important than a title. Diana became part of the royal identity in the public's eyes, not because she was the prince's wife, but because she represented the emotions the royal family often lacked. When Diana passed, those emotions did not vanish. They became memory, and that memory became an invisible standard against which everyone who came later was measured. Thus, Camilla is always in opposition, not opposition by words, but opposition by existence. She is the present. Diana is the past, but that past has never gone away. Every time Camilla approaches Diana's symbols, the public feels the boundary has been violated. This explains why every proposal involving Camilla using Diana-associated symbols becomes a flashpoint. Not because the proposal violates protocol, but because it violates emotion. And the emotions of the public are something the royal family cannot control. Camilla may have current power, she has a title, she has a position, but she does not have the public's full forgiveness. That makes her the antagonist in Diana's story, not because she intends to be, but because the story was never closed. And when current power clashes with past memory, the one standing in the middle is William. True power in the British royal family does not lie solely in titles or reputation. It manifests in how the heir shapes the narrative, chooses who will be remembered, who will be forgotten, and which images will endure in the public memory. William understands this better than anyone. From a young age, he witnessed the rituals, the subtle rules, and how every small action was scrutinized not just by the royal family, but by the entire world. He knew that becoming the heir was not just about wearing a crown, but about silently rewriting history. Camilla exists in the present. She holds legitimate power, is queen, has status, and the right to appear at major events. Yet that power is always limited by the collective memory of Diana. Every time she approaches a symbol associated with Diana, the public reacts fiercely. Not because Camilla breaks protocol, but because she inadvertently steps into a memory that has never faded. Photographs, jewelry, dresses once belonging to Diana now serve as standards for comparison. Camilla, though legally in place, is always seen through the lens of the past. The lover's knot is the most vivid symbol of the struggle between past and present. It is not just a crown or piece of jewelry, it is linked to Diana in iconic moments, images that shock the public, and historical events. Every time the lover's knot appears on Camilla or anyone other than Diana and Catherine, public sensitivity spikes immediately. William understands this. He knows that the lover's knot is not an ordinary object, but a tool that determines memory and the royal image. William controls the future not only through public actions, but also by quietly choosing who and what is allowed to appear. When Catherine wears the lover's knot, the public does not react fiercely. They see a respectful continuation. They see a soft yet meaningful image. William understands that his true power does not always need to be loudly declared. It is in silent coordination, ensuring that Diana's spiritual legacy is preserved, while Camilla is permitted only in the present, never to claim the public's memory. William's decisions are not impulsive. They are built on long-term observations of public opinion, speeches, symbolic events, and audience reactions. There are clear numbers: how often he mentions Diana in speeches, how often Camilla is completely absent in the narrative of royal memory, and public responses to each appearance of associated symbols. All serve as compelling evidence for William's long-term strategy. Camilla does try. She fulfills all her duties as queen, attends ceremonies, participates in international events, and carries out social responsibilities. Yet in the public's eyes, she is always the one who came after, a reminder of an unhealed wound. Each time she approaches Diana's symbols, from jewelry, crowns to important locations, the public responds with opposition. These reactions are not merely personal emotion. They are part of a collective memory that William knows must be respected. This creates a paradox. Camilla exists in the present with full legal power, but she cannot dominate memory. William controls the future without needing public authority. This difference creates a subtle but tense state where past, present, and future intersect. William stands between these flows, choosing balance. He knows that every decision has long-term effects: who will be remembered in history, who will be forgotten, and which images of the royal family will remain in the public mind. The lover's knot becomes the central symbol of this struggle. It is not jewelry for decoration, but a symbol of spiritual authority. When Diana was alive, the crown extended her image, connecting her to the public through every event, every photograph, every moment. After Diana's death, it disappeared from public view, leaving an emotionally charged void. When it reappears with Catherine, it is not merely jewelry, but a subtle political message. Diana's legacy remains protected, properly continued, and unharmed. Camilla, despite her title as queen, can never replace that role. She exists in the present, but the memories and image of the royal family do not belong to her. The public, over decades, has remembered Diana as an irreplaceable symbol. William understands that to protect this legacy, he must control how the lover's knot is used, how symbols are displayed, and how memories of Diana are recalled. True power does not reside in the crown, but in the ability to govern memory and the royal image in the public's mind. From this moment, William is no longer just a nominal heir. He becomes a historian, deciding what is preserved, what is closed, and what endures in the public consciousness. Camilla remains queen, with legitimate power, but in the battle over memory, she is always on the defensive. Every move she makes must consider the ghosts of the past, while William controls the future. From here, the story is no longer about the crown. It is a historical question. Who will be remembered? Who will be forgotten? Who will shape the legacy of the British royal family in the public's eyes? William holds the authority to answer these questions, and the lover's knot serves as a symbol, reminding all that true power does not lie in the present, but in the governance of memory and the future. One crown, two women, one son. That is all it takes to encapsulate decades of conflict in the British royal family. The lover's knot, a symbol linked to Diana, is not just jewelry. It is a witness to emotional moments, a light reflecting the memory of an entire generation, and a tool to define spiritual authority. Each appearance of the crown reminds everyone that not all who hold a legitimate title are embraced by the hearts of the public. Camilla appears with the legitimate title of queen. She has power, status, and a place in major ceremonies. But that power does not equal acceptance. In public perception, she is always the one who came after, a shadow recalling an unhealed wound left by Diana. Each time she approaches symbols linked to Diana, from jewelry, crowns to key locations, the public reacts fiercely. Not because she breaks protocol, but because her presence inadvertently touches memories that many are not ready to forget. Titles cannot replace memory, and Camilla cannot occupy the spiritual place left by Diana. William stands in this struggle as a silent coordinator. He does not need to publicly oppose, nor create a media crisis. Yet his stance is clearly communicated. Each choice of who wears the lover's knot, who appears at major events, It is a decision about the royal family's spiritual legacy. He knows true power lies not in the present or in a legal title, but in the ability to control memory and image in the public mind. William's actions answer all. Diana's legacy continues through Catherine. Camilla exists only in the present, but never becomes part of the spiritual heritage. In the public's memory, Camilla becomes the antagonist, not because she intends harm, but because her very presence always recalls Diana's pain. She is a reminder of an unhealed wound, a loss witnessed by millions. Every step, every appearance, even if legitimate, is measured against Diana. This image makes public acceptance difficult, turning Camilla into a symbol opposing Diana's memory. This is a spiritual form of antagonism, not through wrongdoing, but through existence in collective consciousness. This contradiction also reveals a deeper truth in the royal family. Legitimate titles are never everything. Memory, imagery, and the way the public remembers symbols determine spiritual authority. Camilla may be queen, but she cannot occupy Diana's memory. William, as her son, through subtle and strategic actions, places himself as the guardian of legacy, deciding what will be remembered, what will be closed, and who truly continues Diana's image in history. And from this contradiction, an open question arises for the audience. When William becomes king, do you think Camilla will be remembered as queen, or merely as the woman standing outside Diana's legacy? This question is not just about title, but about how memory, power, and symbolism intersect, inviting viewers to place themselves as observers, to reflect and respond. In the story of Diana, Camilla, and William, the crown is not merely an object, but a witness to the spiritual struggle, power, and legacy that spans generations.